Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Elder Empire Shadow, Book 3 of Killers and Kings, chapters 23 through Epilogue. In these chapters, I really don't even know where to start with talking about what happens here, but I will say, were I Shara, Kellerak would have succeeded in fooling me. He just would, because I am also a dodo. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Asher for commissioning this episode. So, I have mentioned that these got broken up to slightly bigger pieces than I really would think are ideal, and I'm gonna have to rush a drop. However, there is a whole lot of fighting back and forth that I do think that I can sort of skip, and we're going to get into the meat of things, which number one, Calder is actually still alive, but he doesn't look great, and I'm really dying to know what happened to him. I can't wait. This is what I love about the way these two trilogies are set up. It could be really easy to be like, oh, well, when you're in the one POV, in the other book, you already find out what happens at the end. So what's the fun in reading a whole other trilogy? No, that's not really it at all. There is a completely different story happening very clearly because Calder seems truly upset at the end of this section when he realizes that all of them actually didn't know the information that he apparently has been intending for them to receive this whole time. And I don't know if we're going to ever go to we're going to his POV, but I'm really curious if we're going to find out exactly why those messages didn't make it. But anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. So this chapter begins with Lauralee, and she is essentially trying to find her way back to oh my god, Joran. I kept wanting to say Jerry. That is so disrespectful. But there is a situation here that results in them getting kind of cut off by the Testament. And it is being pulled by a humanoid Great Elder. And it looks like it's standing up. We know that there's a Great Elder attached to the Testament. We've been aware of that. But the way this is described makes it sound like something happened to it. And that shit just got put on steroids. So that also really curious. Is it just what it's looked like and it just didn't feel like doing it this way? Did something happen to cause it to change? Will it change back? And also we know that Great Elder isn't super stoked about what it has to do. So is it resentful of all of this or what? So yeah, this is when she sees Calder Martin. And of course she isn't aware Calder is supposed to be dead, I don't think. So she doesn't register shock. It's really just a shock for the reader, unless you, like me, do not expect him to be dead, which probably most of us didn't. So she asks if he has room on his ship for herself and 8 others, because that ship is traveling at a rate that they just straight up did not think was possible, and she needs to get back pronto. And it turns out that Marstrom, who is the captain of the ship she has been on, is soulbound to his vessel as well, and the idea of leaving it behind is really awful for him, and she has to tell him, I get it. I've lost my soulbound vessel before, and she describes it as burning away a part of your heart. But it is not worth dying for. We can come back for your heart of the Aeon later. I personally promise you a team of readers to dredge the ocean floor. And I'm really curious about whether or not finding it, like, if it's damaged, will it still function as a soulbound vessel? Like, how does that work, you know? But I really, the description of burning away a part of your heart, you could have just said losing a part of your heart, and that's just not really gonna be evocative enough. So that got to me a little bit. So then we jump over to Shara, and the first thing we find out is that Carrion is indeed soulbound. Her shears had grown broader and shone deep blue. The blades undulated like waves, and as Shara walked into the room, the High Gardener was levitating a stream of water into a loop around her arm, which, that sounds super cool. I wish that we got to, like, because I have no doubt whatsoever that Will has sat down and figured out exactly how the awakening process wound up where it has for each of these weapons. And I am deeply curious about this one, especially, like, are they meant to represent anything about the person who did the awakening, or is it purely about the intent that's been invested in the vessels thus far? Which, if it is, I guess it would include somewhat their personality as well, because they've been carrying them, well, some of them, for quite a while. Carrion would have, at least. And Carrion being as sort of calming and mutable as she is, water feels like it makes sense for her. Anyway, she tells Shara Dashin's soul binding was unsuccessful, and it turns out he's okay. It just didn't work. And he seems a little bit bummed about it. You know, he's not hurt, but it just didn't work out. I'm wondering if he tried it this time and it doesn't work out. Can he try again? Or do you get like the one shot? Or maybe he can try again with a different vessel. Maybe this is just not the vessel for him. So Laura Lee shows up. She didn't realize that Esther was hurt, so they have to go and visit her. And thankfully, she is able to heal Esther in pretty quick time. And one of the things that she says to help her wake up is, "We need you, Kellerak is after us." And all of a sudden Esther's like, what? I'm awake. What? So I love too. Esther says, "Good job, Shara." And Shara says, "I failed." And she says, "Yeah, but your head was in the right place. Well done." And there is something about that I do really get. Maybe it didn't go right, but if your intentions in all of this and your plan made logical sense and it failed for reasons that are completely outside of your control, I mean, that's still that's more than most people get. I'll just say that. So this is when they talk about the fact that Urgnaut told them in human form the Great Elders are vulnerable and can be killed. And Laura Lee says, "Do you believe him?" And she says, "No, I'll believe when I see it for myself," which does make sense. I don't know, like, the personalities of the Great Elders are sort of fascinating to me, because I have been sort of assuming this whole time that they're like the Fae and they can't lie. And it wasn't until the encounter with Kellerak and the way that Maya, like, shows what he has been trying to do that I realized, oh, he was just able to straight up lie. Or else it was just an implication, but I feel like he was straight up lying. Maybe it was just really cleverly worded so that it wasn't actually a lie. But even if they aren't able to lie, the way that he phrased everything seemed so direct. I was like, could he have just told them a completely untrue thing? And I'm talking about Urgnaut at this point. But I trust that they know elders better than I know elders. So Nathaniel Barrios is here. I just don't even want to talk about this guy right now. You know what? I'm not gonna. He is going to be backburnered because fuck this guy. But Cheska Bennett is here. She looks like shit. She has an eye patch now. And I was like, word? And then there is Calder Martin. And she's like, what the fuck? And he looks really shitty. And she knows that she successfully killed him for a fact. So her assumption is that Kellerak has brought him back to life, which there is no good reason to not think that. Like, that is a really logical conclusion. The direction Shara's mind goes through all of this, I know she's wrong because we know Calder, and it occurred to me maybe Kellerak did bring him back, but even if he did, it just didn't seem, like he was under his sway. However, try explaining to her that that's not what's going on, and good luck, because there's no way to convince her except for, no, I swear I'm not, which obviously that's just not going to be something you can take on faith. So Esther responds in much the same way that Shara does upon seeing Calder, and says, what's Kellerak's bilge boy doing here, as she lifts him into the air by his throat. And Cheska is trying to get her to stop, but she gets frozen, of course. And eventually, Laura Lee says he isn't controlled. I investigated him closely. I am certain. I have thoroughly read him, his ship, his crew, and his possessions. And I was like, oh, really? I mean, it makes sense she was on his ship, that she would just go ahead with that. But I don't know why that didn't occur to me, that she'd be able to essentially conduct an investigation while she's aboard. Awesome. That's exactly what we need. So Esther lets him go, and then they start talking about how they're going to handle Kellerak. And Laura Lee says, we know that he's coming, which is an advantage. We know what their objective is, which is another advantage. And they're going to head straight to a human that has a really strong connection. When we know who that is, we will have a significant opportunity. And this is when Calder says, when they're in human form, we can strike them down for good. And everybody's like, yeah, we know, but how do you know? I told you. I sent messages. I sent messages to all of you. Bliss raised her hand like a girl in the schoolhouse. He told us quite a while ago. And I'm just like, well, I just can't wait to hear this story. I really can't. Shara says, easy to blame silence on a missing messenger. And she says, did you learn that from Kellerak? And he points up and says, from the man in the sky, I spoke to him. And I'm like, now I just super can't wait to read the next book. He talked to Osriel. And when in the mix of it all, did he speak to Osriel? Before Osriel goes down to Cradle again? Or is this post-Cradle Osriel? Or is this Osriel with Suriel as his sort of babysitter? Which I guess still counts as post-Cradle Osriel? I don't know, but I love this. And I love that he says, the man in the sky, I spoke to him. And immediately after, in italics, is Shara's thought, absolutely not. And I was like, I can't be mad at her. Once again, it sounds insane. There is so much about Calder that has wanted to be more important than he is. And eventually, Shara begins to realize that the way he's speaking indicates that he isn't faking it anymore. She can see in his face and in his bearing a certain weight that implies he learned some shit and is like fucked up now, and he isn't as chill and sort of humorous about it all as he had been. In the chat, Jan says that's unclear. Will's timeline seems to have changed, and Evil says Will suggested maybe 200 years prior to Cradle, but he said he would not commit to that. Okay, I don't blame him for not committing to that, because you just never want to say that sort of shit. Like, honestly, I respect a writer who's just like, I'm gonna say this, but like, I reserve the right to do whatever the fuck I feel like doing. So at this point, you really didn't hear? Calder asked. He sounded lost, weary, almost heartbroken. Maybe it was just acting, but Shara was starting to consider that he might be telling the truth. And I love how much she clearly hates that. Eventually, they have like a sort of commiseration moment, but they never really become buds, and I'm totally okay with it, because Shara, it feels like she's got limited room in her heart, and she can understand the position that she took being incorrect without being like, yeah, and now we're cool with each other. So this is when Shara says, well, we should kill him then, because he's clearly the one with the strongest connection to Kellerak, so just take him away from him. And I was like, girl, she was so close for me. She had a moment of just like, oh, wow, maybe he's telling the truth. And she's like, if he's telling the truth, we should extra kill him. Like, that just feels even more imperative now. And Cheska says, look at you, so eager to sacrifice someone else. If a great elder wants me, kill me, Shara responded easily. One life to stop a great elder? That was the easiest sacrifice she could imagine. Cheska bristled. Shut up, Esther interrupted. Kellerak's coming here. He is very close. Perhaps a day. We can use that against him, but none of the others are close enough for me to detect. And I have to jump ahead here a little bit, but Esther says, we'll fight him on the sea. Our battle with Kellerak last time destroyed a chain of islands. If we fight him in the capital, there won't be a city left afterward. And I was like, oh, but like, how do you do that though? And we find out. So, and Teach says, okay, and like, not to be belaboring a point here, but after that, let's say we beat him, the sky is still broken open. So what do we do with that? And Esther says, when the air is as clear of elder intent as we can make it, I will sit in the Optasia and try to talk to him myself. Defeating the elders will make it safer for me, and I will show him we can take care of ourselves. And I guess that worked, but it's not, we don't get a lot, like, there's almost a sense to the end of this book, like Will's leaving a door open to write a sequel. And there is a question mark surrounding the Optasia and some things going on with it that even Shara isn't really sure about. So, and also I should mention that Shara is thinking to herself that Esther sounds super confident here, but there's a sense of it being faked a little bit, which you do kind of have to do. If you're a leader of any kind, there are times where showing how you genuinely feel is just a weakness, and you can't do that because other people are relying on you to know what the fuck you're doing. And it is really wild to me that even if you're wrong, people just want you to sound certain. And it's like the thing that I always go back to, and it's such a silly example because it's on such a small scale. But when I was working at Whole Foods, we would have a lot of customers who were just finding out about certain food allergies that they had or certain ingredients that were supposed to be beneficial for something. And they would come up to us asking questions about which brand we preferred or whatever. And it would be a question that was overall very subjective a lot of the time. And my manager was listening to somebody give a recommendation that was very sort of hesitant and admitting that they really didn't know and they hadn't tried either of them, so they couldn't speak for certain. And after they finished interacting with this customer, the manager took them aside and took all of us together and was like, guys, I get it. You haven't tried it before and you want to be honest with them. But don't be honest with them. Tell them this one's the one you want. And just pick one. Let them think you know. They will feel better. It will help them make a decision. And if it turns out that isn't the one they like the best, they will just think that it's your opinion that they didn't agree with. But there's no downside to just giving them a decisive answer so that you can move on with your day and get other stuff done. Otherwise, you get involved in this back and forth and conversation that we just don't have time for. And that was a real eye-opener for me because I realized how many times he had had interactions with customers where he really did just go, that one. And I took it as him knowing, as somebody who worked for him. So to find out he was basically faking all of that the whole time, I was like kind of impressed because I felt like I've been treating him with a respect based on my interpretation that he has experience with all of this stuff. And so he has like this respect that's kind of based on something false, but also the reality behind it is from experience. It's not the experience of the product. It's the experience of how to handle people. So he still was deserving of the respect. It was just in a totally different context than I was thinking. So anyway, I just like the whole thing with leadership is a wild, weird thing. And I want to be somebody who's like better at this. I wind up getting put in this position a lot without even intending to be, but I don't handle it super well because I don't like telling people what to do in certain contexts. There are others in which I totally do. Don't get me wrong. But anyway, I really can't afford any more like tangents like this. I'm so sorry. I'm getting back to it. I swear to God. So at this point, Shara has a moment where, because Joran is saying, if someone up there's fighting Erg now, maybe they can reach in and help us out. And Calder says, don't count on it. And he has this look. And Shara thinks about what the man in the sky looked like. And it says he had gripped his dark scythe and looked down on them as though surveying a field of ripe wheat. He's here to put us down, isn't he? She asked. Calder looked up at her and she thought she registered surprise. He says that if it looks like the great elders are going to escape, he'll destroy everything, the entire world. That made sense to Shara. I love that line. It's not followed up with like, oh, a chill ran through them all, or there was a silence as everyone processed. No, it was just, yeah, I would also do that for sure. So Bliss says, well, Ergnau already made it out. Do you think it's too late? And I was like, he did make it out? Like, did he get past him? How, like, what happened there? I don't know what it means when she says that. And I love this. Barry has tapped a stack of papers into line, drawing Shara's attention to him. It was a shame. She'd almost forgotten he was there. And he says, so you think we should just sail off and fight all the elders? Do you really think that's a good idea? And Lauralee replies with a quote, "We will fight until we can no longer lift our arms, and then we will pick up swords in our teeth and continue fighting. To our last breath and beyond, we will give no ground to the elders." To our last breath, muttered Joran, Esther, and Calder, all together. He had joined in with the regents as though it was the only natural thing for him to do, but he didn't look as pretentious as he had before. He looked haunted. Throughout this entire exchange, since his resurrection or whatever had happened to him, there had been a darker edge to him. Even with the reassurance of the regents, Shera started to suspect he really had seen death. And I'm like, I mean, he definitely has. I don't know if Osriel brought him back, because I don't know if Osriel has that ability or if something else, you know, like, genuinely do not know. But clearly some fucking shit, especially considering there's a moment where he picks up a couple people and Laura Lee is like, he didn't used to be that strong, I'm pretty sure. So there has been some kind of transformation, and I don't know what that could be from. So I really do love, Calder says, even if we beat him now, he could still come back. And Esther's like, yeah, that's what we do. But there is a way out. When the battle begins, stay next to me. He looked up and met Shera's eyes. So he really did intend to sacrifice himself to kill Kellerek. Good for him. I love her so much. She is so fucking practical. Like, I am certainly sentimental, and she is as well, as Maya points out later, but these moments of her just going, all right, yeah, with shit that's kind of like fucked up, honestly, it is delightful. It reminds me of when Yaren finds out that Mercy has been like cut off from her abilities by her mother for leaving the family, and Mercy's like, God, why didn't she just do the merciful thing and kill her? This is a fucked up thing to do. Oh God. And Cheska and Bliss are both like, what are you doing? What are you saying? And Shera is like, that's wild. They really seem to give a shit what he's about to do with himself. And I wonder what he could have done to make himself so important to them. So I'm going to like skip over a lot of the prepping for this fight, because honestly, a lot of it, the thing that we really need to talk about is Barrius. This first moment is cracking me up, because once you know that they're aware of what he's going to do, rereading it now hits so different. So he suggests that they work for him. And Shera immediately tries to do like, I decline your offer. And Yala is like, listen to him, Shera. This is your job. And they have a really convincing back and forth where Shera has to be persuaded to listen and entertain his suggestion, yada, yada, yada. And then she says, I can't think this is a bad deal for you. I would certainly like it to improve our working relationship. Yala, we should consider this. And Shera saying, I'm going to need time to consider. And I should mention, too, that there is a ship called The Final Solution. And considering the, like, associations with that, I am really weirded out by the fact that Will chose that as a name. And I don't know if that's on purpose, but why would you do that? I don't... Anyway, so Bastion's shadow shuddered and began to slow. Shera turned, not to the captain, but to Maya. What is this? I promise you, he's not... Oh no. Alchemical fire in the hold! She hadn't expected to be this furious, but she also hadn't expected Barrius to be this stupid. So, at this point, they're talking about how he had several other plans. They caught the other ones. I'm sorry if you guys can hear that. My watch is making sounds, and I don't know why. I've had to reset everything because I got a new phone, and shit's acting bizarre right now. So, Shera says, this is a strange time to commit suicide, Barrius. And he starts getting so smug and is like, you know, you guys think you know everything, but you know what you don't know is that not anybody is actually on your side or trusts you. Not even the people that are the closest to you. And then there's a prick in Shera's neck, and it says instantly she slumped down. And I should have realized, because it doesn't say her muscles suddenly went weak. She felt herself like dropping to the floor. It just says she slumped down, which is a very specific way to say that. And guys, I'm sorry. I'm just going to like do something to try and shut this up. I'm going to just like put it down here and hope it just stops talking. So Yala says, I take it you have no problem endorsing me as guild head? Various let out a laugh. You have no idea how to savor a moment, do you? Yes, you know I'll support you. Now we're extending a ramp. We have space for you all, and we should be able to catch up soon. Yala lowered her captain's horn and spoke into the shadow of the deck. Is that good enough? The twin witnesses, Azea and Kalazan Farstrider, took their hands away from their candles and nodded in unison. Now, what they were about to do to Barius would have full justification. He had made legal preparations implicating the consultants in the event of his assassination. Otherwise, Shara would have killed him a long time ago. Shara rose, placing fingers to her tender neck and wincing. There had been no poison on the needle, but Yala didn't have to stab her. She could have faked it. And Barius is like, I can't believe that you're showing your hand already. She slumped to the ground and she's getting back up again like in 2 seconds. What are you even doing? And then he yells to Furman, and Shara interrupts and says, Furman, time to come home. So Furman the Mason, who had been in position for 10 years, slit his employer's throat. I absolutely cackled out loud. When I say cackled, I mean alone in my living room listening to this audiobook, I went, ah! Because it was so unexpected, and especially because how ridiculously over the top the relationship between Barius and Furman is. For Furman to be in on the whole thing is so much more satisfying. I love it. I love it so much. And it's so good, especially considering how like earlier in this book, I was going, I still can't believe all the places they managed to get their own people into. Like, they just infiltrate everywhere. And I didn't know how incredibly correct I even was. And there's also the fact that, like, Furman got that room prepared that Nathaniel was supposed to, like, sick a chimera on Shara if she didn't agree to take that potion. And Ayana killed the thing, but I just figured Ayana had figured it out. But probably Furman went and was like, Ayana, 2nd floor, 3rd room on the left. You're going to want to go in there and take care of that. Anyway, so it says it was somewhat odd seeing someone kill their twin. Their twin? That I didn't remember. Are they, like, how... Is that because of some sort of weird alteration that happened to him? Or I just don't remember anything about their physical descriptions, really. So it being written like that was sort of... It took me off for a moment, and I feel like I missed something. So it says the explosions would only cripple their ship, leaving it helpless for their return. Asher says they mentioned that he dresses and looks like Barius. Oh, okay. I didn't realize that. Just totally forgot. So I love this. Furman executes a perfect swan dive over the edge, and he had intended to swim over, but was caught in midair by a cloud of shining purple butterflies. And I was like, yay, the purple butterflies! Shara later is carried by the purple butterflies, and she is sort of like, all right, I get it. This is kind of fucking ridiculous. But I maintain that they're both wrong, and that sounds great. So Furman says, let's see. Oh, yeah, here it is. Back over on the final solution, Barius stood up and gasped for breath. And I was like, motherfucker. After years of fleeing bliss of the Black Watch, Barius's protections against assassination had reached truly paranoid levels. Even with Furman feeding them information, they had not been able to determine a way to definitely kill Barius, short of Shara tearing out his life with Cyphron. The man drank a regeneration elixir with every meal. We traded him. We've lost too much time, Captain. Catch us up. If he survives, he will make a tenacious enemy. We sent his escape plan to Bliss. Oh, Furman said. Very good then. Which I am pumped for Bliss. Because she clearly hates this guy. He clearly did some shit to her. I am really looking forward to her getting to exact revenge. If she does get to. Which I am going to just pretend she definitely does. So. We've got the fight with Calorak. And just overall, I am going to jump to the moment where she manages to drive her sword into his back. And she's doing this, her shear, forgive me. She does this by, like, Calder setting himself up as a distraction. And she's actually pretty impressed with this whole thing, with the fact that he, like, puts himself in the position that he does, because in order to do it, Calder has to kill his own wife, which truly, I was not expecting him to be able to do it. Once Shara starts saying he wouldn't be able to, and she was going to have to jump in and help him kill her, and she has this sort of sense of inevitability that he's going to lose his nerve at the last second, I pretty much trusted that he was going to be able to do it. But initially, finding out that they're facing off, I was sort of going, oh boy, I don't know if he's going to manage it. And she turns around after getting into her own thing, and Maya is like, I didn't know he had it in him. Wow. He had, and it said something like he had torn his wife apart. Like, she isn't literally torn apart, but she is in extremely bad shape. So let's see, I'm trying to find the spot here. She was bleeding from a dozen wounds, the most grievous of which was a slash across her face that tore her mouth and nose in two. Ugh. The wood splintered, his wife fell through the railing. The body made a splash as she hit the water. And Shara's looking at him like, wow, how is he this strong? Something is going on. She thinks it's probably alchemy. And she's also shocked at just how decisive this was. He completely commits. He does not hold back at all. There's no moment of hesitation. There's no sense of like, I can't bear it. None of that. He just does it. And she's like, man, I'm kind of like wishing that I didn't hate you so much, because that's the attitude to have. And then this voice echoes in her head. And it laughed and laughed until laughter was all she could hear, and Jyrene's body rises. And it says, but Jyrene wasn't the one wearing that body anymore. Which I was like, don't care for that phrasing. Thank you. Ew. And it says, this body barely passes muster, but any port in a storm, as they say, and neither of us are willing to let you go. Which implies that she's sort of still in there a little bit. And that, like, her not being willing to, like, there's something really sad about that. Truly, this whole thing with Jyrene is so sad. And I'm furious with her, of course. But I had hoped that there would be some moment of her and Calder getting to commiserate at all, have any kind of understanding. Doesn't look like it. And maybe it happens in his book and we just haven't seen it. But I mean, the way this ends, he seems fucking committed to ending her. And while I'm glad of that, because we've been in her head and we know how completely right she thinks she is, I just, the feeling of somebody that you used to love having betrayed you to this level, that's just awful. So at this point, he begins another attack. Everybody is starting to come together and converge on him. And then these statues begin to rise from the water. the Emperor had taught her some precautionary tales of those who had dealt with Kellerak. One particular example involved the four protectors of Belden, an ancient bronze statue of the four regions. They were crafted by Soulbound and invested by the Emperor himself to defend Belden. The city leaders had become so afraid of Elder attacks, they had sunk the statue down to Kellerak in a bargain for peace. In seeking defense, they had traded away their only protection. The Emperor had personally executed them all. So Shara knew that not only were these statues meant to defend against the possible rising of a great elder, but they had also been sunk thousands of miles from here. Kellerak had somehow transported them here. And at this point, four bronze regents rose to face their living counterparts. And I'm like, yo, this is too much. There's too much happening here. She decides that she's not going to get distracted, and she comes after him. So Calder, like I said, distracts him, and she plunges her shear into his back and begins drawing power out of him. Every part of him and of Jyrene dissolved, and she gets filled by power that is almost too much for her to hold. Her vision clears, and Calder is sitting there, and she apologizes. And he says, "What are you sorry for?" Calder had been a reckless, selfish idiot 1,000 times, and his actions had put the entire empire in danger. But if Shara had succeeded in her contract, or even if she'd killed Jyrene, none of this would have happened. And it would have been so funny if she were like, "I'm really sorry I failed to kill Jyrene." All those, obviously she doesn't say that, but it wouldn't have been completely unbelievable if she had decided to phrase it that way. So she says, for failing to kill Nabarius Claiborne. And he says, "I'm sorry I let Lucan die. I didn't want that to happen." And she tries to be like, we're even now, essentially. And he does drop it. And at this point, Ergnaut won, she said out loud. "No, he lost. And now it's over anyway," he finished. Shara was about to ask what he meant when she heard a new sound drift through the air. And this is when fucking Nakothi, her body, rises out of the ocean. And she's like, did fucking Kellerak do this? Did he manage it somehow before he died? Is this revenge? Because we know that he can't really die. The elders don't work quite like that. I mean, if he can die in a human form, die, I guess that's a true death. I don't know. I think it is. But he winds up being able to speak with her, and I'm assuming that's because of the power that she drew, not because of, the rules working differently than I thought. I'm not totally sure. So, at this point, she turns and sees Kellerak standing there. "It looks like you can use some help. Why don't we make a deal?" And it turns out that he's inside her head. So she winds up having a conversation with him, and everyone around her is looking at her and at each other, kind of going, "What is going on here? Is she okay?" And Kellerak says, "Since we're limited on time, let me present my offer as clearly as I can. I want you to put me into an object and throw me into the ocean. I will be no threat to you. It will take me centuries to return to what I was. Then I'd like you to leave. Just go home. Let Nakothi take a host, no one you know, and rise up to do battle with our outsider friend. Otherwise, he'll kill us all. If you know anything about me, you know I keep my deals. And this is my one chance to live again. The outsider plans to blow up this entire prison world so long as our kind burns with it. You are just the insects nesting in the jail." Which, that is just rude, putting it like that. I just hate that. "Set me free and go home." You want me to abandon them? Take them with you. What fun is being alone? Anyone who matters to you, take them. I can give you protections far greater than Bastion's Veil. You can live out the rest of your days in a paradise. That was a vague, flimsy promise, and it didn't move Shara, but she did catch another mistake he'd made. So everyone else suffers as the great elders roam free. And he says, why do you care? What use are strangers to you? And he forces her to relive moments where she basically, like, especially killing Maxwell, said, I don't have any further use for you. So she kills him. And the Emperor being like, I need you to be ruthless. And she was more ruthless than even he had expected. And be cold. Make the rational decision. You know I'm not lying. Preserve yourself and everyone you care about and leave. Stop risking yourself for people you don't know. And what she decides here is that he is so convincing and she is so close to doing what he asks that she needs to kill herself in order to stop him from being able to manipulate her. Which this is such a good example. I'm gonna wait. She says, she remembers to herself, like, saying very flippantly, if a great elder wants me, kill me. And she's like, I'm just going to put my money where my mouth is. And I'm also going to put this gun where my mouth is. And she's about to pull the trigger. And Maya drops down and yells at Kellerak, get out of her head. She can see him somehow. And I love this. I thought it was just my brain. I didn't think he was really there. And Maya begins basically, like, half-heartedly beating her up and going, you don't see that you're giving him what he wants. He is doing that thing where he pretends to want one thing, so you adamantly decide to do the opposite, which it turns out is what he was trying to get you to do the whole time. And I realized what a dodo I was, because we know he wants her to be dead. She isn't supposed to be part of this equation. She's been fucking up the works. I don't know what exactly, like, how that happened or what that really means in the big scheme, but I know that, like, he was not a fan of her being alive at all still. So I should have fucking put it together. The deal he's proposing is meant to be the thing that turns her to do the opposite. But I didn't think of it because I am not thinking clearly. And I just love this. When she tries to say, I think I see some things more clearly than you can. If you set your personal feelings aside, you have to see it makes sense. And Maya says, you've never set personal feelings aside in your life. And Shara, when she's like, why did you kill Maxwell? I had no use for him. And she laughs and is like, you killed him because he killed your best friend, you absolute idiot. Yeah, saying I have no further use for you is just a nice way of saying I realize that you don't have my back or the backs of anybody that I care about. So what's the point of you, actually? But it is easy to conflate those things and make it seem like you're completely passionless about the whole thing. And I think I was fooled by that in the moment, thinking that it was passionless, even though I also recognized her personal feelings were part of it. So I gave her a certain amount of credit of being, like, very cold-blooded. And certainly Shara is more cold-blooded than the average person. But that isn't to say that she just doesn't care about things. And then, do you even pay attention to the decisions you make? Did you risk your life on a secret solo mission because it was going to succeed? Or because you wanted to set Lucan free? Do you sleep all the time because it's the optimal use of your time, or because you like it? Which I really thought, guys, that sleep thing was going to wind up being linked to the elders, and I was super wrong. Did you fall in love with Lucan because you're a rational decision-making machine? And essentially, I want you to tell me how many other people have done more for the Empire than you have, for the consultants, for their friends. While I'm alive, I won't let you die. I still have a use for you. This proves nothing. Shara, caring more about your friends than other people is not heartless. That is normal. Now that you're listening, I've got another question. What makes you think Kellerak really wants what he says? Don't you think he might want you dead? And then Shara, so I should stay and fight? And she's like, oh, what do you think? Come on. So she stays and fights, long story short. And they manage to defeat the dead mother's horrific body. Ugh, guys, this is so gross. Every time he talks about the way flesh makes like slapping sounds as it hits the ground. Oh, God, I hate this so much. It's so gross. Anyway, plopped onto the deck. Plopped. Ugh. Why? There's a heart of Nikothi that drops directly in front of Shara, and she kicks it over the railing and into the sea. And she says to Maya, you handle the rest, and blacks out. And then we have the epilogue. And Shara says, and that is it, I'm done. And she's getting ready to go away for a while. And I was super puzzled. Like, why? Where are you going? I wasn't getting it, you guys. I was not getting it. I felt like a real idiot once it's revealed what's going on. It hasn't been made clear when exactly you're all departing, but they know it's soon. And her use of the word departing, I'm just like, what? Who? I'm so dumb. So, are you looking forward to it? Being done with work? Yes. I've dreamed of this day since I was a girl. I mean the rest of it. No. I don't think I am. And I really like this moment where Shara thinks to herself how she often has to sort of ask herself a lot of questions to understand what she's even feeling about something, which fucking same. That's just being a person to a degree, and you're more aware of it than the average person, which is kind of you being ahead of the game, even though you think you're behind the game. So good on you, I think. And it's only 2 years, then we'll pop back in and see how you're doing. 2 years the first time, and then who knows? And Shara is thinking Maya's going to want a big dramatic goodbye. She offers her hand and then says goodbye, Shara. Shara begins to shake her hand, and then Maya pulls her into a hug and is crying. And Shara realizes that she is also crying and is like, wow, I didn't know I felt like this. That is surprising. I don't know where that came from. If I could just tell you guys how many times I have burst into tears and been like, oh, I guess I felt something about this. Oops. It is so pitiful how like unaware I can be about something. I can talk about some things cold-blooded, but if you bring up just the right thing, I'll begin my sentence and choke up and start sobbing before I even get like 3 words out. It is wild. So, Asher in the chat says that's also a neurodivergent feature. It's called alexithymia, being unable or less able to identify emotions. Interesting. Well, that might be a thing then for me, because I definitely have to sort of sit down and figure it out. This is part of why when I start to get like upset, I don't want to have the argument in the moment, because so much of the time I will realize afterward that what we argued about wasn't actually the thing I was upset about. So I've learned to pull back and be like, you got to give me like a couple hours, because I'm going to have to sort through this all so that I can come back and have a conversation with you that is actually about it. Because I know that's not what it's going to be if we do it right now. And it's helpful to like know that about yourself, but it's really hard for other people who are in the heat of the moment wanting to have it out, understandably, and for you to be like, no, you're going to have to wait because I need time. Like, it just can feel really shitty for them, you know? But it's genuinely helpful to everyone in the end, I think. Anyway, she steps into the other room and the other regents are all here. And they're all talking about how much they all cried before they went away as well. That it was just a big, like, emotional moment for all of them. Joran says, I cried like a Marinthian waterfall. Woke up 10 skips later still crying. Which, there's something about that. Waking up and you're still crying. Like, oh my God. And she has her own coffin with an image of her surrounded by mist and carrying a shear in both hands. Alagaeus' name had been erased and replaced, which I'm sure would fucking kill him if he knew about it, with a new one. Shara Gardner, Regent of the East. See you in 2 years. It was utterly dark inside. Her heartbeat echoed in her ears. She was surrounded by cold, but the robe kept her surprisingly warm, and the alchemical gas pumping into the air was almost scentless. Shira relaxed into the padding at the bottom, and with alchemy and intent flowing through her veins, she slowly fell into the deepest sleep of her life, until it was time to get back to work. And that is where the book ends. Now, I'm just realizing now, this second, that there are bloopers. I didn't even see this. What a fucking goon. Hold on, I'm reading these out loud. Yala bristled, stepping closer to Esther 6. On what authority do you interfere with the consultants? You're not the Empress. If you... In mid-sentence, the High Mason was hurled into the sky as though launched from a catapult. Her shriek grew more and more distant until she vanished from sight. Today, Shara thought, is my favorite day. That's got real kicking Ethan Aurelius vibes. The Emperor held out the pulsing gray-green heart. Join me, Esther. Bind your soul to this and we can rule for eternity together. Sure, that sounds great, Esther said. Can I see that for a second first? The Emperor handed over the heart of Nikothi. Instantly, Esther crushed it into pulp. The Emperor stared after it in horror. Why, Esther? That was eternal life. For a moment, I thought, yeah, why don't we bind ourselves to the heart of a great elder so we can live forever? Then I had an even better idea. Let's not do that. Oh boy, I'm excited about this one. Benji hovered in midair, his shears now purple and hooked like sickles. Purple light fluttered around him in the form of a cloud of butterflies. Can I try again? Benji asked. Sure, Shara said. Miraculously, the next soul-binding attempt succeeded. Benji returned for the second time. His shears fused together and stuck to his forehead to form a rainbow horn. One more time? Why not? He emerged the third time, his blades having transformed into a shimmering pair of pink pixie wings stuck to his back. Benji started to cry. Oh, man, that's kind of fucked up. Benji. Jyrene wore an iron mask of anger. Kellerat keeps his bargains. Ask Calder. I will, Maya said lightly. Then she left. A moment later, she walked back into the room. I changed my mind. Calder is dead and we killed him. The look of shock and horror on Jyrene's face was more than gratifying. Maya savored it for a moment, then added, and now I'm going to kill you before you can escape from us like you did last time. Before Jyrene could respond, Maya snapped her neck. That really should have been what they did, but there you go. Ooh, then we have another one. The announcement went out all over the empire. To prevent the spread of disease, citizens were required to implement quarantine procedures. They should stay home as much as possible, keep at least 6 feet away from other people, and cover their mouths and noses with masks whenever they went out in public. For the Consultants Guild, nothing changed. That's pretty good. That's a little quarantine pandemic humor for you there. Oh, that's precious. It's a little time capsule. Oh, love it. Love it. What a delightful ending. So yeah, so Shara's a regent now. And I guess it's just the insanity of the powers that she has, but I really thought she would need more. And I guess absorbing the power from Kellerak like leveled her up, probably. I just don't really know what the qualifications are for that, you know? Asher says, I'm not a big fan of Calder in general, but I like him best in his final book. It's a lot of fun. I'm so excited for you to get to it. Yeah, somebody else, I wish I could remember who it was, but somebody mentioned that Calder's third book, in their opinion, is the best of all 6 books. So I'm pretty stoked. Yay! All right. Well, I'm really excited. I'm excited that I get to start the next one right away. Also, thank you, Asher, for commissioning them both. And it's really going to feel weird because once I finish that's going to be the first of the Will White series that I finish because Cradle's still going at this moment. So it'll be a surprising thing for that to be the first place that I say goodbye to. All right. I'm going to wrap up. Thank you guys again so much for listening. Until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.